You ever have one of those mornings that starts off just perfect to perfect? Birds chirping, sky clear. Even your grumpy old dog looks like he's smiling? That was me, cup of coffee in hand, watching Baxter roll around like a spoiled house guest on my front lawn. I just finished syncing a new diagnostic panel to my home grid relay, and I was feeling proud like I'd done my small part for the world. See, I'm an energy systems consultant in my house. Well, it's part of a little-known backup grid tied into the city's emergency infrastructure. Not flashy, not labeled, but crucial. My EV charger isn't just for my carrots connected to a solar buffer I built myself, one that feeds into Fire Station 9's backup system 2 blocks down. That cable is a lifeline when the power goes out. I mean, it's the kind of thing you hope never gets tested, until the day it does. And that day came with heels clacking. I swear, you could hear her before you saw her. Regina Mathers, vice president of the HOA and full-time menace. Power walking down my driveway like she had a subpoena in one hand and divine authority in the other. Starbucks in one hand, a laminated HOA policy sheet in the other, and that face tight-lipped, eyes scanning for violations like a robot from a dystopian future. Before she even opened her mouth, I knew where this was going. She launched into a rant about uniformity and community standards, how my charging unit was a visual blight from the street. I tried to explain, calmly, that the system wasn't just city-permitted but installed in cooperation with emergency services. I even offered to show her the documentation. But Regina wasn't here for a discussion. She was here for theater. She said, and I quote, "Nobody wants to live next to a transformer station. This is a neighborhood, not a damn utility yard." Then, without so much as blinking, she stormed over, grabbed the thick, city-tagged cable, and yanked it from the socket like she was exorcising a demon. The seal popped. Relays clicked. And just like that, emergency grid link severed. It took a second for it to register. I just stood there, stunned. That wasn't just my charger. That was the main line connecting to Fire Station 9's backup inverter. With it down, the station was stranded. I tried to explain. Again, even pointed to the city tag welded onto the box. But Regina waved me off, scoffed, and said something about me playing NASA in my garage. Problem is, you don't just flip these things back on like a breaker. Protocol requires a full manual reset sequence I had to complete myself. And until then, the grid was dark. No backup. No redundancy. Nothing. I filed a report with the HO, a fat lot of good that did. The president, Doug, was a retired dentist who mostly just smiled and nodded while Regina ran the show with her iron tongue. She'd already bullied the Johnsons into repainting their fence and fined a veteran down the street because his flag had faded. But this was new territory. This was danger disguised as decorum. That night, while I was knee-deep in the garage trying to restore the connection, I saw red lights flashing through my windows. I stepped outside, and there he was, Fire Chief Morales. Stern, soaked, and not happy. He'd traced a failure in the station's backup system right back to my address. I told him everything about the grid, the relay, Regina. He listened, nodded, and was about to speak when off course Regina marched over from across the street. She saw the lights and assumed, once again, that someone other than her was breaking the law. She accused the fire chief, yes, the actual fire chief, of impersonating a public official and called 911 right in front of him. Gave them our location and everything. I thought Morales was going to blow a fuse. He kept his cool, but the look in his eyes said this wasn't the first time he'd dealt with an entitled vigilante. Patrol arrived, confirmed his identity, and gently told Regina to go home. She did, but not before shouting, "None of this would have happened if your house didn't look like a tech experiment." The next morning, a rusted van pulled halfway into my lawn. Greg's Home Repairs. And who should step out but Greg himself, Regina's cousin, a man who once tried to sell me a home warranty at a block party. He scratched his head, toolbox in hand, eyes locked on my charging unit like he was about to slay a dragon. "Karen told me to fix the grid problem," he said. When I asked if he was licensed, he just laughed. "Electricity is electricity, man." The moment he touched the panel, it sparked like a swarm of hornets. He jumped back, hollering. I warned him again this wasn't a DIY project. But he ignored me. Started yanking wires, coiling cords like he was packing up after a garage sale. Until boom. A fuse blew. Smoke rose. He screamed. I shut it down manually from the breaker, but the damage was done. 10 minutes later, Regina pulls up in her Lexus, decked out in a tracksuit like she's hosting a PR event. She accuses me loudly of installing unapproved electrical equipment, endangering the neighborhood, and violating HOA code. I calmly point out the city permits, co-signed by emergency services. She waves a crumpled HOA handbook from 2009 like it's the Constitution. Later that day, I receive a notice from the HOA $10,000 fine for violating community infrastructure guidelines. Threats of eviction. No mention of permits, of course. That's when I launched my counteroffensive. I grabbed my drone, flew it over her property, and sure enough, through a crack in her garage window I spotted coiled copper wire, my missing panel face, and Greg's van loaded with scorched components. Jackpot. I compiled the footage and sent it to the fire department, the city zoning board, and the county power grid office. What followed was a domino effect. Inspectors showed up. Engineers confirmed the sabotage had crippled the emergency link. Even worse, the city revealed something I hadn't known. During a recent grid optimization, my node had been rerouted to support a hospital overflow zone, a care facility, and over 800 homes. Regina hadn't just pulled a plug, compromised public safety on a massive scale. And then, the storm hit. Midnight. Winds howling. Rain pounding like fists. Lightning struck. Transformers blew. The house flickered dark. My phone buzzed. Zone 4 grid failure. Backup not detected. That included the fire station and the care facility. I ran out with my toolkit, kneeled in the flooding driveway, and rerouted the emergency bridge manually. Got partial flow to the station just enough. But the relay 2 blocks down needed rebooting. So I ran. Soaked, cold, out of breath, I reached the utility shed and triggered the sequence. The booster roared to life. Minutes later, I heard the scream of water jets from the hoses. The fire was being put out. We had made it. Barely. The next morning, Regina unrolled her yoga mat like nothing happened. But the city SUV that parked in front of her house said otherwise. 2 inspectors. 1 clipboard. A warrant. She tried to deny them access until they unlocked her garage with a master code Greg had already given up. Inside, they found everything. Stolen cables, burnt conduits, unlicensed equipment. Surveillance footage from a neighbor showed her sneaking it all in. The city convened an emergency HOA meeting. Everyone showed. I presented the data, the drone footage, the fire department's warning. Regina tried to pivot something about protecting kids from EMF radiation. The crowd wasn't buying it. Doug, the once silent HOA president, stood up and read a statement removing Regina from office. Permanently. She didn't argue, just gathered her things and walked out, like a villain who finally realized the crowd had turned. But the story didn't end there. The city brought me on as a consultant. We rewrote the HOA bylaws. They called it the Regina Rullian Emergency Clause that now mandates compliance with city infrastructure standards. The funds she hoarded from bogus fines? Voted unanimously to build solar lights and battery backups for the whole community. And one morning, I found a letter, handwritten, from Regina. No apology, just blaming the city, on the storm, even on me. But the kicker? She asked for a character reference for community service. I didn't respond, just forwarded it to the clerk and filed it in a drawer marked "Do Not Recycle." Today, my charging unit still stands, now armored and updated. The fire station is connected. The hospital zone protected. The HOA meetings are open mic, neighbors wave. Dogs bark playfully. And right above the unit, mounted in a wooden frame, hangs that scorched cable. A plaque beneath it reads, "Pulled by force. Rewired by purpose." Regina tried to unplug a community. But what she didn't count on was that when you cut the power, people don't give up. They get to work. And if you've ever dealt with an HOA horror story or know someone who has, drop your story in the comments. I'd love to hear how your neighborhood found the lighter still lives in the dark. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to know sometimes the best revenge is keeping the lights on.